Hi, I'm Jahmaal Marshall, CEO of Listen and Speak LLC, also host of Listen and Speak podcast, mindset coach and counselor and consultant. And what you can expect in this episode is myself and Prosper speaking about root causes of childhood trauma, but also how to overcome that trauma and how to develop your presence both in the workplace and at home. We get down deep and we're going to go to the surface. We're going to go all over the place to make sure we land you safely, but also to land you in a place where there's sustainable progress and sustainable success.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today's guest is an absolute powerhouse in the realm of human behavior and counseling. Now, Jahmaal, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing well, Prosper. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I can't wait to jump into this episode, especially knowing the amount of time and years you've had and experience, doing what you're doing. And I'm not going to spill the beans. That's the reasons why we've got you on the show today. And for those that are watching right now, we're in for a treat as we deep dive into the journey of Jahmaal Marshall, who is a certified counselor and founder of Listen and Then Speak. Like what he's doing right now, he's just listening to me because he's going to be speaking a whole lot later. Now, just get ready for an episode that is going to be packed with wisdom, a bit of humor, and a lot of actionable insights that would leave you wanting more. Now, Jahmaal, I could go on and on singing your accolades and everything else that comes along with it, and defeats the whole purpose of having you on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a counselor and also studying your business, Listen, Then Speak.
Yeah, that's a good question, Prosper. Myself, I'm originally from the West Coast. So right now I live in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., but I was born in Los Angeles, specifically at Harbor City Hospital, uh, long ago in 1984. So I'm totally dating myself. And I grew up in a pretty non-culturally charged household, pretty well balanced. And I didn't realize until I was about 5 or 6, we had a two-parent household, and my parents were originally from DC. They came back to DC because my dad's job switched up with the unions, and my mom worked government, so she could switch her job out here. And it wasn't until I was about maybe 6 or 7 until I realized that my dad was a drug addict. I didn't know what drugs was. I didn't know what alcohol was. I was 7, that I had my innocence. And when he was that way, he could be very abusive. And so I found a safe place with my mom. Uh, she was a woman of faith. She had become a person of faith in 1986, I believe, a Christian. Um, and as we got older, it was like mom was divine, but dad was like mean enough to be Satan himself. And I wanted to be close to him. It's like when he was sober, he was such an amazing dad, but he drowned his sorrows in drugs and alcohol. Um, and when he was stressed, or that was his mechanism for stress was alcohol and drugs. And when he was drunk or high, he could be extremely abusive and very unpredictable. And so for me, um, interacting, with him was to try to not do anything wrong, and to try to have everything perfect. Had a room perfect, have the house perfect, have my behavior perfect, have school perfect, any sports, any activity, just do everything perfect. Because I had so much rejection at home, I didn't want to experience any rejection outside of the home. Um, and I didn't realize that developing all of these ways of being so uh, excellent would be perfectionism. Uh, in school, nothing but straight A's, except in math. I wasn't good at math. Um, and in all my jobs, my performance appraisals all read outstanding and excellent. But for me, it was a trauma response. Um, One thing I was able to do because, uh, I'm the youngest of four, but it was just two of us. We're two of us from my dad's second marriage. I was often say, okay, well, dad's not around right now, so you got to be the man of the house. So I knew how to be dad and how to be surrogate spouse. And so I learned early on how to problem solve in ways that maybe I should not have known that early. Um, And then I don't know, I was kind of weird. I'm the youngest, but I was always an old soul. And so most of my friends were twice my age when I was like a kiddo, you know. I was always drawn to people who were adults. I could play around with other kids, but as far as like keeping time and having conversations, I didn't really find that very enjoyable. And I noticed these adults and older people would come to me with some issues, and I would be able to give them actionable advice that worked. I was able to listen and kind of suss out. So the way an IT person problem solves by fixing your computer, I was able to problem solve through human interaction. Um, so fast forward to me being, say around 18, everybody kept asking me, you ever thought about being like a counselor? And I was like, I don't want to be no shrink. That was around the time when Dr. Phil was really popular, and I was just like, I'm really not trying to listen to people's problems all day. And I'd gone to college for computer graphics because that was something that was really, lucrative, but I hated the schedule. Bro, the classes were all over the place. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm on campus for 6 hours just for three classes. Not doing it. So I switched to general education and fulfilled like all my requirements. And it was around the second year uh, when I decided I was going to declare my major. And I chose to go for psychology. And I really enjoyed it, man. I didn't think, I mean, a lot of it was boring, especially the clinical part of it was just like, was putting me to sleep. But I really enjoyed understanding why we do what we do. Um, and even studying it from different cultural perspective, because it has different ramifications culturally for different people. Um, I transitioned then to Region University and I was able to get my BA in counseling psychology. Um, and then through doing practicum, I realized like, wow, this is complex, but I had a lot of my own issues. Um, so I never planned to actually become a counselor. I started my career at Department of Justice. Um, I was working off the Senate side of the Capitol at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I wanted to go into the prison system to be a DTS. I wanted to be a drug treatment specialist and get all these inmates off of psychotropic meds with, which is illegal, but I just thought the heightened use of it caused more drug use, and so that was the dream that I had that drove me. And I was there for 6 years, but I wasn't able to go into the actual prison system. Something happened with my paperwork as a co-op. Um, and so I literally worked myself out of a job. It was so strange. And so I had like, once that position, like I got to the height of it, I transitioned out and I had all this discretionary time. And I didn't realize, like, you have time on your hands. I was full time in college, really almost working full time in the government. And I didn't realize how broken I was, you know, because of my own fear of rejection. Obviously as a knucklehead in high school, you do the promiscuous activity and stuff like that. And I drank and smoked, but that wasn't like a drug of choice for me, you know. Like the drug of choice that I latched onto when I let those things go, I decided to become serious about my faith at 18 years old. I decided to latch on to pornography. And I said, okay, well, this is a decent outlet where I'm not in bed with anybody. I'm not drinking anything. I'm not smoking anything. And I didn't feel like, with smoking, I was like, okay, or drinking, I was like, well, if this is in the genes, I definitely don't want to be doing this because I don't want to end up like my dad was. And you know, man, when I gave up like all those outward things, I became a very hidden uh the drug I was using was hidden, and I didn't realize that a lot of it was attached to my fear of rejection, my bitterness, my unforgiveness with my dad. I would blame him for like my behavior. Um and we had gone through so much together. And I was really broken inside. Fast forward to 2006. He came in one night and he was drunk. His eyes were bloodshot red. And that's when he shared his story with me about his dad, that his father never told him he loved him. He found out about his dad is because my paternal grandmother took him down to a bread shop and she said, that guy you see every day, that's your father. Um, and that's how he found out who my grandfather was. This guy was a successful entrepreneur. He left my grandmother and my father nothing. And when he was older, I think my dad was a teenager, my paternal grandfather told him that he paid my grandmother to abort him, but she wouldn't. And so he turned to drug use for just all the pain. And he had so many younger brothers and sisters. And, my grandmother brought home a lot of babies, and he was always helping to raise them. And so he himself never had a childhood. He loved children, and he loved us, but he didn't know how to show it. And so I, for a long time, I really hated him. But when he told me that, it endeared me to him. And I didn't think for myself being, coming up in my faith, I had the wherewithal to solve his problems, but I could point him to someone who could. And I said, hey, can you just go to church with us tomorrow? I myself wasn't living perfectly, but I was like, man, dude, like, do something. And he did. And he met with my pastor and he surrendered his life to Christ and God. And it changed something about him, man. And even with all those changes, I was expecting like perfection overnight. I was still bitter with him inside. Um, and so you fast forward to 2009, we went on a men's retreat together, and I found out about some counseling in the Midwest of the United States. And because I wasn't working, I took the opportunity and I went and I said, like, I need this. I was steeped in my own brokenness, steeped in addiction, you know, uh, and I just felt lost. And I got my degree, but it was like, Jamal, if you're going to help other people, you need help yourself. You actually need to get to where you are physically, spiritually, socially, emotionally healthy, so you can help other people. Otherwise, you'll just be doing this in hypocrisy. And for 7 months, I invested thousands of dollars into my own spiritual, physical, and mental wellness. And it was like boot camp. I did not like it. And I learned a lot about my bitterness, a lot about my unforgiveness, just so much about what was going on in my mind. And it was so weird that during that time, I was able to come back after 7 months. And I remember seeing my dad, and I talked to him about just everything I was feeling inside. And he said, man, I can't, judge you. That's only God's job. I'm just here to love you. And we had never had an exchange like that before. And I remember asking him, like, hey, can I take a picture of you? We were just sitting out of the park. It was just the strangest moment. He said, sure. And I took a picture of him. It was just a beautiful moment that we shared. And for like years, the man who I deemed my worst enemy became my best friend. And we were just really tight. And I began to confide in him. And they had asked me to come back and, to do an internship, the place where had gone through counseling, and I did, as crazy enough. And so, that was 13 extra months invested in my spiritual, mental, and physical wellness. And so much had happened in me. So for the next 2 years, um, one of the leaders there saw a gift in me. He said, I think you should start taking some training for counseling, like to get certified. So I started doing, some of the retreats and the clinical training and different trainings. I already had the degree, but it's like, well, you need a certification now if you're going to actually do this. And, um, it's kind of crazy. I never thought that that would be the track to it. Like when you say, what do you do today? You know, it's a very dark past, but it's qualified me to actually deal with a caseload of very broken people and to bring them to the path of wholeness. Um, like you were saying before we jumped on here, I'm not one of those people who became like some life coach that got laid off their job in COVID. Like I've been doing this for years, and the price has cost me a lot of my life. So it's actually ingrained in me.
Wow. Thank you so much for taking us on that journey, man. And the one thing that I really appreciate about all of this is how brave you were in retelling this story because from the age of 5, you were going through quite a lot and having to jump through hoops just to find love. Now, my question is so many kids, when they're growing up, they really aspire to be like their dad and things of that nature. You didn't have that, did you?
There was times I had it, but they were few and far between. It was so unpredictable. I had those moments like I want to be like my dad. And then there were other moments where it's just like, I don't want to be anything like dad and different things that, young boys especially learn from their father. As far as being a gentleman and chivalry, I had to teach myself those things. Um, So those things, you know, it was a sense of pride that came with the fact that I was self-taught in a lot of things, but also a sense of anger that I didn't see that example model before me.
Absolutely. And it's a good thing that at least mom was there because she then provided that cushion and obviously things of that nature. Have you sort of ever had a chat with mom with regards to what you went through, or has that not been?
Oh yeah, we're held hostage to our secrets. You know, definitely, you know, I mean, I was gone. I mean, by that time I was 24, but for 7 months. And so I definitely had a chat, you know, about what I went through. And um, you know, it was amazing to watch their marriage get healed because they were on the brink of divorce quite a few times. And so, you know, when he changed and when God changed his life, it was like literally like watching somebody go from night to day. But like at first you don't trust it because it's like, man, I know you.
Yeah.
You know? Uh, and then it takes a while. You know, when trust has been broken so many times, it takes years to re-engender that trust. And he did, you know, by God's grace.
And there was four of you siblings. Like, did you all go through the same, or did he have favorites?
I thought the one right above me, my sister, uh, Jazz, I felt like she was the favorite. And I grew up early on pretty jealous of her because I felt like they had a connection that we didn't. And like maybe if I could do whatever she was doing to kind of win his heart, then that would work. And it only sabotaged it. So, yeah, yeah, that's how I felt, you know. Later on, I would find that, you know, he and I, we we developed our own relationship, which was uniquely ours. Like, you know, and you know the story. I can't get into it too early on, but we were thick as thieves before he transitioned away from here. So.
Absolutely. I quite like this because at the end of the day, I mean, when you're going through stuff as a kid, you've got all these people that you're supposed to be learning from, and you're very impressionable at that age. And I'm quite happy that you then also turned out to be who you are today because some people never really get past that generational trauma. And I think where you are now, you seem to be saying the buck stops with me because granddad also didn't do his part. Then he passed on to dad, and then you sort of saying, "What? We're moving on, um, you know, better us, for lack of a better word."
You're right on point. I mean, at some point the buck has to stop, otherwise the trauma just proliferates and it gets worse. And I have a choice, you know, and by the time I was 24, Prosper, I had to make a choice. Like, am I gonna feel sorry for myself? Yes, some very real hard things have been perpetrated on me, things that I didn't come into this world. I wouldn't have chose that. I certainly wouldn't have written it that way. What's happened has happened. Now, what do I do with it? You know, how can I, and more importantly, my faith's important to me. How are we going to make lemonade out of these lemons? Because these are some really sour lemons, and something has to be done. Otherwise, if nothing is done, in 2009, it became real to me that I wasn't going to be around long. You know, dealing with the suicidal ideations, just the depression. I said, okay, something has to happen. And that's when I got serious to make the investment. Um, and it was so much more than just sitting around talking about my problems. It was actually doing actionable things to recode my belief system.
I quite like that. And I mean, obviously, having been broken at a younger age, like you were, I don't know if you understand this whole concept of, back in the caveman days, you know, people, and up until today anyway, we're still very societal beings. All right, so if you were cast out of the clan or the cave, you were left to the demise of either weather or the saber-tooth tiger and everything else along those lines. And I can only imagine as a kid, if you didn't actually feel comfortable at home, or you felt rejected, like you kept repeating, that would have really done a number on your self-esteem and everything else that came along with it. Now, you kept repeating one thing, that you always wanted to be perfect. when it came to sports, maths, and everything else that came along with that. How much did that actually ruin your fun and your childhood? Because other kids were just being kids, yet you wanted to make sure you dotted every I and crossed every T, just so that you're not rejected when you got home.
Yeah, a lot of stuff wasn't fun. I mean, the fun, I could count the times that were fun, and most of the time I was spent in my head, very prickly, very cranial, just trying to stay 7 to 8 steps ahead of everyone else. And when you live life like that, and your brain maybe supposed to go 70 miles per hour, but I was going 700 just to stay a step ahead of the game or many steps ahead. I had to, get to the point where it's like, Jamal, you're not Doctor Strange. You can't suss out all these possibilities, these infinite possibilities of what you don't know. And it was a different way of trying to be in control because, at home on home front, internally, I felt so out of control. So whatever I could control, I controlled it. I could control my grades. I could control somewhat. I was, wasn't a super athlete. I was semi-athletic. I could get it done, but there's certain things that I could control. I could control my performance, appraisal when it came in from a manager. And so in everything, I went above and beyond. And even in social situations, like with friendships, you know, um, I can be, me personally, I can be pretty comical. I try to control through comedy or, control through certain moods. I control by actually allowing, people into my circle and allowing for more time than I had capacity for. Nature by nature, I'm pretty much like an ambivert. Once I'm done though, I'm done. And I don't want to be around anybody and it's not personal. But early on, man, I would be stretched so thin. And when I became serious about like my faith, definitely not some perfect dude from some white picket fence, far from it. But I was involved in like 7 different ministries and volunteering and doing all this stuff. I barely had a moment to myself, you know, because I never said no. So also to me, perfect meant saying yes to everyone. And when you say yes, whatever you do, do it really, really well. And that's not sustainable.
Fantastic. Now, that now obviously points a shining light as to why you're now helping other people go past this, because you've had lived experience of all of this. Like what we mentioned earlier on, some people would have just read a book or walked through some burning coals, and then they label themselves a coach or somebody who can actually help others have a happier existence. But what you do now is sort of helping people tackle, first of all, burnout, and also codependency and people pleasing, in their roles or in their private lives. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you're now offering to people, and how it's actually making a difference to those that are having access to it.
Yeah, good question, man. So I was able to, after years, of being a counselor, and mainly when I first became one, I was working with addictions. And so all of my clients, had some type of drug addiction of different types of drugs of choice. Um, and because I was able to overcome some of my own addictions, I was able to work in that area. But I think sometimes we think of addiction in the non-socially acceptable thing. Like, of course, if there's gambling, if there's alcoholism, if there's drugs, if there's, pornography, just I could name a myriad of things that are just kind of like, okay, well, you don't want to be doing those things. But many of us are addicted to excellence. And I mean that in a bad way. Most of what we see in the market is a trauma response. When I see the word high performance, I'm just like, okay. And I think to run a successful business, to be a really good CEO, to build out and scale something, you do need to be a high performer. But a lot of times people are just performing. And even in the career space, most of the people I serve are managers, upper level managers as CEOs. These people don't have a safe place where they have an outlet, and they find, especially when you think of upper level management, most of them never wanted to be managers. They just wanted to be a subject matter expert. It's like, give me my corner office, corner cubicle, I'll work and I'll be excellent. And they say, no, the path to promotion is actually what? Managing director reports. And so you think about the problem there is that the people who were once their peers and their friends and their, let's happy hour buddies are now the people that they're managing. How do you then establish boundaries with your direct reports when that was the relationship? Then you get a new team that comes in. And so your mental health starts to get a little shaky. You have new managers above you and a board that you answer to. That can be very problematic because we forget that we bring our psychology with us to the workplace. I think a lot of people think once I put on a pair of loafers or ladies a pair of heels, I throw that stuff off. It's like you don't cast that off. You bring your family history, you bring your biases, you bring your belief systems, your BS, you bring your psychology, you bring your biology. You bring all of that through the door with you. And so working with managers actually to get to the root cause of their belief system, working with the different parts of them, childhood them, teenage them, adult them, because that's three different people with three different aspirations, three different mindsets, you know, and measuring the progress. I believe talk therapy in and of itself can be effective, but not maximally without specific accountability, where you measure the progress. And so when I see my clients actually grow in learning how to be assertive and negotiate without being nasty, learning how to own the space wherever they go in their career, their business, actually negotiating so they power position themselves because their belief system is now being reinformed. Most of my clients are already empaths. They don't need emotional intelligence workshops. They then become self-aware. You can be others aware, but you need to be aware of yourself so you know how to navigate these spaces. I have clients that come to me. When they come to me, they have one or two clients. When they're done, they have double, actually not even double. I had one that had 12 clients by the time they were done with me because they started to believe. Career-wise, my clients can now challenge for bonuses because they can navigate the space, their workspace, not just with confidence, but psychological safety. When I hear the word confidence, I'm like, okay, that's cool, but there's plumb crazy people who are confident. We got to go beyond those psychological buzzwords and get to the root cause of what we believe and what is in our subconscious belief system, because that is what informs our behavior. And so I'm loving seeing my clients get results. And also after they're done, when you can put the business down and when the work is done, we actually have some habit formation outside of that that sets you up when you go back to work. So there's sustainable success. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm crushing my business, but are you getting crushed outside of your business?
I quite like that because so much of what we come across in the marketplace is all hustle, 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 confidence, authority, all of those really big words that seemingly mean nothing in today's world. What does that, in compared to, are you being authentic or are you just merely showing up? Without us seeing everything else that you bring into the table. And I quite like how you say wherever you are, there you are, because you're bringing in all your generational trauma, you're bringing in all that stuff from home. It doesn't just, switch off just because you put on your big boy pants on, like you say. And I quite hope a lot of people are taking note of that. Now, while people are watching this, who specifically should reach out, to start working with you? And at what point can they notice that, wait a minute, I think this is Jahmaal time?
So if you're an executive leader, uh, in any corporate company, obviously you're going to be able to afford the services or they'll make budget for it. If you're a business owner or one who's developing a side gig, those are typically the ones that reach out to me. And I would say someone who is self-aware enough to where it's not, oh, that's my past self. I wish I would have met you 20 years ago. A lot of times, if you see these behaviors where you have to be the social barometer of your family, your friend group, your business group, and you feel like you cannot breathe, you have no room to breathe. And also, whether you're white, brown, black, or yellow, culturally, you feel like things are not a fit. I've worked with white men all the way to South Asian women. So I run the gamut where I can culturally nuance my practice in a way that's effective for you. I've found it strange that most people start reaching out to me and saying I wanted someone who was a man of color to work with me, who I felt like would understand me. Uh, and when I first started counseling, I had primarily 90% white guys on my caseload, and now it's such a rainbow of different people. But That's who I work with. My clients run anywhere from 35 all the way to 65. That's kind of the median age. So I would say median age would probably be like 47, 50, but um, mainly around that. And the professionals, mostly when I do mentoring, and that's kind of just like 1 hour sessions, those are like the young professionals who like, okay, I'm new. How do I navigate this space? But those who are working with me for the first 90 days and we're going through 12 weeks of intensive counseling, those are the executive leaders. And those are the upper to mid-level managers.
Fantastic. Now, Jamal, indulge me a little bit here, if you may. What you are presenting and coming up with somehow sounds like a rite of passage. Now, when we were growing up, in my culture, from the age of like 13 to 16, you'd be called in by the village elders and they would proverbially tap you on the shoulder and let you know you're an adult now. All right, you're not a kid anymore. Now you can do adult things and start leading either your family, your career, everything else that comes along with it. All right, and so many people, as we are growing, we don't have that pattern break where we just go from 3 year old tantrum throwing kid to 65-year-old retiring person with nobody having stopped us to say, hey, you now need to walk this path. You now need to act this way. And I'm saying this because you somehow had your own rite of passage when you did the 7 months. And you went and learned all you went and learned. And from there, your life kind of changed. And then you took on another 13 months. And now you are, coming back to the village saying, hey, I've seen what that looks like. Let me show you the way. Would you say this is what it is that you're offering, or somewhat of a similar indulgence that these people now can experience when they work with you?
I would say that's pretty accurate. I'll add to it though. Even after that 13 months, having gone into almost 8 years of nonprofit work after that, and then another 4 years, back in investigations, once I had resigned from, doing that form of counseling full time, I can definitely say that there were so many different things in the workplace, in the professional realm, in the nonprofit realm that I had to navigate, like even culturally, um, and learning how to speak truth to power without getting fired. I think a lot of times people fear they're in survival mode. And with my clients, I like to take them off autopilot and put them on purpose. That's a phrase that I've coined and trademark because a lot of times a pattern, this is another phrase I've trademarked, a pattern remains a pattern until it's disrupted. And the pattern of our subconscious is going to inform our behavior. And when you enter a room and you feel maybe like you're other, it will inform the way you speak to people, the way you work. It will inform even the way you handle your schedule. It will inform the boundaries that you put in place. We have to remember boundaries are for us. Other people respect them when we do. And so I had to understand my identity, as a professional and as a leader. And you get what you tolerate. What was I going to and not put up with? From the newest intern, helping them and grooming them to become a great employee to the top CEO to the board, letting them know I'm here to do a job, but we're going to respect each other and being very clear about that. And I think you have so many employees, it could be based on their family history, based on their ethnicity or gender, who will function in fear and their biology, even with their heartbeat, is their irregulation going on inside is affecting their mental, which affects everything else. The mind, in many ways, is a control tower to the body, but the heart also informs the mind. And so it's bringing clients back into emotional and physical regulation. Even the way we breathe, we don't realize that uh, and when we sleep, we're breathing pretty properly, but when we're awake, we don't take the time to take those breaths to even help our brain to re-regulate. How am I processing intel in a way that's effective for me? I can tell you from someone who long ago even left money on the table as a result of wanting to please recruiters and please people in talent acquisition. It was like somebody would just give me a certain look and it's like, whoa, am I worth to charge that much? And it's just like, Jamal, yeah, you're the subject matter expert. You should be charging that much. That's, as a human being, your worth is priceless, but your expertise, what comes at a price?
I quite like that. I quite like that because you can't do well if you don't feel well. You know what I mean? And a lot of people really neglect all of that because they just like you were in the past, just don't want to be rejected. And I quite like the thing that you brought in about boundaries, that boundaries are for us, not for other people. And the way I usually explain this to people is, look at your name is Jamal. I didn't come up to this show and said, I'm not gonna call you Jamal. I'm gonna call you John because you look like a John. All right. So whoever you show up as, that's how people treat you as. You're Jamal, and that's how we're gonna call you. All right. And so many people just bend to authority without actually checking where that is actually taking them and if it's in their best interest. Now you've got a 10-week mind master method, right? Just maybe briefly walk us through what that does and how our audience can actually benefit from that, and if you may, how they can get a hold of it.
You got it. So the 10-week mindset master method is a method that I've worked through for years with clients. And unlike the talk therapy, which just is kind of snowballs into you just talking about your own problems, or the coaching, which is just me being your cheerleader, both of those in and of themselves are ineffective. And so we combine the two, with analysis of root causes, intake analysis of actually where your energy levels are, what your family history is. Like I literally go down to the root with each client. And then we began to master what is in your subconscious belief system and how do we make your biggest weakness your greatest strength. And then we go through your goals and we set a timeline for that goals. And then we time audit what your day looks like. And then day by day, each session, I tell all my clients during the intake, is like a soap opera. Every session builds on the last session, which builds on the last session, which builds on the last session. And we share a live document. It's so that they can see their progress being measured. Otherwise, they'll just be sitting across the desk talking to me forever. We don't want that. I want to get you out from around after 3 to 6 months. I want you to be done with me and be in a place where you're sustainable. We take the training wheels off. And so that method has been proven to give clients results. Whether that's your physical health, I've had clients come off addictions to wine, to cannabis, your business. I've had clients 7x their business, definitely 2x. That's on average. That just happens by nature. And also establishing new habits and then breaking those patterns, but also understanding why you had the old patterns. That the thing is, whatever's a second nature is going to be a second nature until you learn a new nature. We have to do a lot of unlearning, and it takes at least 90 days to change the neuroplasticity of the brain. So what I offer as a pay in full bonus to the 10 weeks is 2 extra sessions. So we want to make sure we get to the finish line and we position you well and power position you for sustainable success. And the way your audience can get a hold of me is Jahmaal, Jahmaal at listenthenSpeak.com. That is my email.
Absolutely. I'll definitely make sure we've got that information right at the in the show notes there. Now, speaking of listen then speak, you also have a podcast, right?
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit about the Listen Then Speak podcast, just in case people are not quite ready for the 10th weeker, but then they can sort of dip their feet by listening to you and yeah, just the unique approach you have of interviewing people that are doing good in their realm and things of that nature.
Yeah, so if you type in the words listen, then speak on Spotify, you'll see an orange face pop up in my likeness. That's me. And I love interviewing book authors, entrepreneurs, CEOs, people at the height of their career. And I wanted them to take me on a journey of what their mental health was like through all the highs and the lows. We live in the age of information, and Prosper, you and I both know a lot of information that we receive is false, especially with AI. I don't know what I'm looking at. One thing is you're seeing the workstation here, you're seeing the workspace, you see my face. What you see is what you get. Everything is so AI generated. I have no idea. And so I'm actually getting past all the generation. We're going beyond the brand with these people. And one of my hashtags is let's get into it. Let's get into it, not to break someone down, but to build them up. And the audience is definitely built up, but it's also so many mic drop moments because as a counselor and someone who understands human behavior very well, I can pull out of them what no other person pulls out of them during interviews. We don't keep it basic, we go deep.
Ooh, I quite like that because at the end of the day, so many people, like you say, they just show up with their surface level, and I quite call it their representative because whoever we see
Mhm.
online, that's not exactly who they are in person. And yeah, do you maybe take them on a tennis game or something like that, or is it just all online?
It's all online. I used to do it all in person. If someone's local here to the DC area, we can meet in person. But yeah, and I think for my clients, it saves them gas and time, so they don't have to come meet me. But if they want to, they can.
Well, look at what we've just done here. Saved air flights, air tickets, and hotels and everything else that comes along with it. Plus the whole jet lag with the time difference because we're like miles apart. But I quite like what we've created here today. And but it would be remiss for me not to close this loop here. Because you've gone on a journey. You've really turned around that people pleasing kid that was out there just wanting to be a perfectionist and things of that nature. And given your traumatic sort of childhood and the journey that you've gone to heal yourself, what sort of advice would you give your younger self? Could you go back in time?
Man, if I could talk to young Jamal, I would just sit next to him, wrap arms around him, and I'd say, little guy, man, you don't gotta try so hard. You are loved and you're worth it. And I know we hear those words and they sound very trite, but I think if, as a young boy, if I could hear those words, it would really go into me. Just to hear that from another man, and an older man whose voice inflects a certain way. Um, if I could hear that, yeah, I would just tell him that. I'm like, just relax and have fun, man. You only live once. Have fun while you're here.
Absolutely. But it was this little perfectionist, people pleaser that has now created the men we just had a chat with. And I really appreciate your go throughs because half of the time we can only connect the dots looking forwards. We cannot, backwards. We cannot connect them looking forwards. So while you were going through what you were going through, it was prepping you to becoming the person that you have now become. So I really appreciate that. Now, let us know. We've just spoken to young Jahmaal. What's next, for senior Jahmaal? Okay. I'm supposing it's going to be your life begins run about this year or in the next coming months. What upcoming projects or goals can our audience now expect to be on the lookout for now that they've been introduced to you?
Actually been living life. It's been pretty cool. So a new area, obviously working one-on-one with clients, but also doing more executive coaching now, which is a lot of fun. Because executives, especially at that level, they don't always feel safe. They have to always be on. And I'm gonna give them a chance to not be off. It's like I want to work with you, not your representative, and I want you to be everything you are and everything that you're not. Also, I'm working on a book. I'm not going to say the title. I don't want to give it away too soon. And many more episodes of the podcast, and also going more and more into the area of public speaking. Last year, I had a time to do some consulting. So also doing some corporate consulting. So if anyone's listening and you have a company and say, hey, I want a subject matter expert to come into my company, to work with a team or to work with me, and do a test run, see like, well, how would it be to work with Jahmaal first so I can bring him into a team? Prospero will give you all my information. Because doing the consultation and even providing safe space for corporate teams, I find that lights me on fire. And then doing the public speaking, it's weird. I'm not DEI certified, but I always get called to sit on a DEI panel. And for me, it's not a certification or a piece of paper or a money grab. This is my life. And so I'm really good at this because I live it.
Absolutely. Well, man, I appreciate that. And for that book with no title yet, right? As soon as it launches and everything else, could you also make a stop by the Online Prosperity Show so we could talk about it and, just introduce it to the audience because you've already hinted that it's coming. So now we can't wait.
You definitely have my word, brother. I will do.
Fantastic. Well, that concludes an incredible journey with Jahmaal and another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I mean, a huge thank you for you, my man, sharing your story, your wisdom, your experiences with us today. It's not easy, having to recount what you went through, but it takes a certain level of safety within yourself to be able to share and literally help others be, do, and have a happier existence so they don't go through what you went through. So this must have been a shortcut to how to live your best life, without people pleasing habits or any of that perfectionism that a lot of us still go through without actually realizing. All right. So if you want to rewatch this episode and catch any details that you might have missed, or if you're hungry for more insights like this, I suggest that you hit the subscribe button below and catch up with experts and subject matter experts like Jahmaal, who always come and give us advice on how to live our best lives on the Online Prosperity Show. Once again, Jahmaal, I will put all your details in the show notes so that people can get a hold of you. And I'm hoping you'll get a lot more subscribers, to the Listen Then Speak podcast right then. Now, until next time, this is Prosper and Jahmaal. We're signing off. And I'm just urging you to stay tuned for more success stories and strategies on how to live a better life on the Online Prosperity Show. Bye for now.